For a long time, the consensus was that psychological development had a strict finish line. Once you reached adulthood, your personality was considered completely locked in. Early psychoanalysts, driven heavily by Sigmund Freud, built their models on the premise that the core of who we are is entirely forged in our earliest years. Psychoanalyst Erik Erikson observed something different. He argued that human development does not stop at age 18. Instead, it is a continuous, lifelong process. Erikson defined his core mechanism as the psychosocial crisis. At every major phase of life, we are forced into a conflict between two opposing psychological tendencies. This 8-step path maps out those exact crises. Winning a conflict earns you a specific virtue, a positive strength you carry forward. But poor resolution inflicts a pathology, a maladaptation that damages your personality. From our first breath to our dying days, we never stop fighting for our identity. Looking at the first block on this timeline, infants from birth to age 1 face the crisis of trust versus mistrust. When a caregiver is consistent and warm, a child learns basic trust in the world, earning the virtue of hope. If neglected, they learn fear and withdrawal. Between ages 1 and 3, toddlers strive to control their bodies and their environment in the crisis of autonomy versus shame and doubt. Supportive guidance yields the virtue of will. Excessive restriction breeds compulsiveness. Moving to ages 3 to 6, children begin initiating activities through play and imagination. Encouragement here forges the virtue of purpose. If punished for their curiosity, they develop deep guilt over their own desires. From 6 to 12 years old, the focus shifts to school and skill building in the crisis of industry versus inferiority. Success and encouragement yields competence. Repeated failure or harsh criticism leaves lasting feelings of inadequacy. These first 4 stages successfully build the basic architecture of the self. However, this entire childhood sequence is strictly preparation for joining society. When we hit adolescence, roughly ages 12 to 18, we encounter the crisis of identity versus role confusion. The struggle here is to actively define our personal beliefs, our career goals, and our social roles. Exploring these paths successfully anchors a stable self-concept and grants the virtue of fidelity, of faithfulness to one's values. Failure leaves a person fractured and uncertain of who they actually are. That stable identity is a strict requirement for young adulthood. From 18 to 40, we face intimacy versus isolation, where we seek to share our identity through deep emotional commitments. When we can be vulnerable and form close bonds, we achieve the virtue of love. The inability to do so results in severe social isolation. This flowchart reveals the strict prerequisite logic of Erikson's theory. You cannot achieve love in stage 6 if you lack a stable identity from stage 5, or if you still carry the deep mistrust from your very first year of life. Entering adulthood permanently shifts our psychological battles. We move away from internal self-control and directly into the hazardous terrain of human connection. By middle adulthood, ages 40 to 65, our focus expands outward again. We enter the crisis of generativity versus stagnation. Adults attempt to conquer this crisis through productivity, whether through parenting, mentorship, or meaningful work. Guiding the next generation earns the virtue of care. If a person fails to find a way to contribute, they fall into stagnation. This manifests as intense self-absorption and a profound lack of purpose. True psychological maturity at this stage requires us to look past our immediate desires and actively sustain the world that will outlive us. In the twilight of life, from age 65 onward, action slows down. We face our final psychological task: ego integrity versus despair. This is a period of pure reflection. If a person can look back at their accumulated lifespan and accept it as meaningful, they achieve ego integrity and the ultimate virtue of wisdom. Conversely, an unresolved life yields deep regret. That bitterness hardens into an overwhelming fear of death, manifesting as despair. Erikson himself wrote about this phase from his own late-in-life perspective, viewing it as the quiet completion of the human cycle. It is the only stage we cannot actively fix with future action. It is simply the unavoidable summation of our past 7 victories and defeats. That complete timeline, hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom represents the full gauntlet of a life well lived. According to Erikson, no matter what age you are right now, you are currently standing in the middle of one of these psychosocial crises. We are never finished growing. Psychological development is an ongoing, active choice. The pen is still in your hand. You must decide right now how your current chapter will end.